Man, you wouldn't believe this. I walked into Starbucks and my fiancé was laughing with another man. Then he said, "Bro, I didn't know, but..." It was supposed to be a simple lunch run. I'd left the office early to grab a few drinks for the team from the Starbucks near Main and Elm, the one Mara and I used to stop by on lazy Sundays. I remember thinking I might even grab her favorite caramel drink on my way back, a small gesture before our dinner plans that night. The line was long, and as I waited, I scanned the tables to pass the time. Then I saw her. Mara. Same hair tied up in that effortless way she always did, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He was sitting close, too close, leaning toward her in a way that only someone familiar would dare. Her laugh wasn't the polite one she gave coworkers. It was the kind that came from comfort, the kind I thought was ours. My brain didn't catch up to my eyes. For a second, I just froze there. She wasn't supposed to be here. She'd told me she was working from home. The man reached out, brushed something off her shoulder, and she didn't flinch. My chest went cold. I walked forward, each step slow, controlled. I wasn't sure what I was doing until I was standing right behind her. The man noticed me first. His smile disappeared instantly, and he straightened up like he'd been caught stealing. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, almost under his breath, "Bro, I didn't know." But, before standing and leaving, Mara turned around, face pale. The air between us thickened. She tried to laugh, to say something casual, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. My gaze dropped to the table. 2 cups, both half empty, one with her lipstick on it. She reached for my arm, but I didn't move. My eyes caught her phone screen lighting up on the table, a message notification. Just a short preview, but it was enough to hit like a punch. Ian speech balloon. Same table again next week? I didn't say a word. The people nearby had gone quiet, sensing tension. My hands were steady when I picked up her phone, looked at it, then set it back down. She started rambling, something about it being a work thing, a client meeting, bad timing. But none of those words matched the look she'd had when she laughed with him. The barista called out my order, but I didn't move. I just looked at Mara one last time, long enough for her to realize this wasn't something I'd brush off. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the city was loud. Cars, conversations, sirens somewhere far away. Everything felt muted to me. I stood there for a moment trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't angry yet, just empty. I took one step toward my car when I heard someone behind me. It was the barista who'd served them earlier, a short woman with tired eyes, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked uneasy. "Hey," she said softly. "You should talk to the woman who was here last week. Same seat, same people." She was crying. She slipped a napkin into my hand before walking back inside. I opened it later, sitting in my car. On it, in neat handwriting, was a name. Sophie, comes by around 5. Ask her about him. That night, Mara tried to call. 6 times. I didn't answer. When she came home later, I was sitting on the couch, lights off. She stood in the doorway, hesitant. She said she could explain that it wasn't what it looked like. She started crying, not the guilty kind, but the panicked kind. I listened for a bit, silent, then asked her one question. "Why did he say, I didn't know?" She froze, like the question hadn't even occurred to her. That silence told me more than any explanation ever could. I didn't press her further. I just told her I needed space and went to stay at my brother's for the night. Lying there on the couch, my mind replayed everything. Her laugh, his hand on her shoulder, the look of guilt when he saw me. It wasn't the act itself that destroyed me. It was the ease of it. The comfort. The fact that she could sit in the same coffee shop we used to share and act like I didn't exist. The next morning, I couldn't shake the thought about that woman, Sophie. I went back to Starbucks around 5, like the note had said. The same barista was there, and when she saw me, she just nodded toward the window. Outside, parked in a silver SUV, was a woman. She looked tired, eyes red, hands gripping the steering wheel, but not moving. I hesitated before approaching her. She rolled down the window a few inches when she saw me. "You're Lucas, right?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You're the fiancé." That word stung. I nodded. She looked away, then back at me. "I'm Sophie," she said. "Ian's wife." And just like that, the air shifted again. Everything I thought I knew about what had happened wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a network of lies that stretched further than I'd imagined. She told me she'd been following them for weeks, watching from that same car. She'd suspected something, but had no proof until now. Apparently, Ian told her he'd been mentoring someone new at work, a marketing consultant helping him land a promotion. The client meetings lined up perfectly with the times Mara said she was out running errands. Sophie's hands trembled as she spoke. She showed me photos she'd taken, blurry but clear enough to recognize them. Same clothes, same table, same Starbucks. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I didn't know who she was. I didn't want to believe it was real." I didn't have words. We sat there in silence, two strangers connected by the same betrayal, watching the same cafe where both our lives had cracked open. When I finally got back to my apartment that night, Mara was sitting on the floor in the hallway, waiting. Her makeup was smudged, her phone beside her. She looked up when I arrived, her voice shaking as she tried to start explaining again. Something about emotional confusion, mixed signals, not meaning for it to happen. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask questions. I just told her I'd spoken to Sophie. Her face drained of color completely. She whispered something like, "You weren't supposed to," but I didn't let her finish. I walked past her, into the bedroom, and started packing a bag. By the time I closed the door behind me, the anger had finally caught up with the numbness. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her rewrite what I saw. And I wasn't done with Ian either. The next morning started like a fogged mirror. I woke up at my brother's place, but barely remembered falling asleep. My phone was still buzzing from unread messages, all from Mara. Some long, some short. The last one just said, "Please don't do anything stupid." I wasn't sure if that meant she thought I'd hurt Ian, or that she thought I'd tell someone. Either way, she still believed she had control of the story. That was the first thing I decided to take from her. Around noon, I drove back to Starbucks. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe to face it, to make it real. When I walked in, the same barista from yesterday looked at me with a half nod, as if to say she'll be here soon. I ordered black coffee and sat at a corner table. I didn't touch the drink. At 5:07, the silver SUV rolled up outside. Sophie stepped out, wearing a loose sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. She looked like someone who'd run out of tears but didn't have time to fall apart. When she saw me, she hesitated, then came over. We sat down without small talk. She opened her bag, pulled out her phone, and showed me more photos. Different days. Same table. Same cups. The timestamps lined up perfectly with Mara's work meetings. In one photo, Mara's hand rested on Ian's leg under the table. That image hit me harder than seeing them together in person. It showed how practiced it was. "I followed him last week," Sophie said quietly. "He checked into the Lakeview Hotel. Said it was a business retreat." Lakeview. My stomach dropped. I'd paid for a hotel reservation that same weekend. Mara told me it was for a team-building trip, said her boss was reimbursing her later. She'd used my card. Sophie must have seen the realization hit because she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know until yesterday who she was. I thought it was some stranger. I never imagined she'd be engaged." The word engaged hung between us like smoke. I could still see the image of the ring box I'd saved up for, the look of shock on Mara's face when I proposed, the way she cried and said I was the safest person she'd ever known. Maybe that was the problem. Safe. Sophie rubbed her hands together. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I just need him to admit it. I can't live with the guessing anymore." That line stuck with me. I realized I was in the same place, half living, half guessing. "Then let's make him admit it," I said. We came up with a plan right there at that Starbucks table. Not elaborate, not dramatic, just truth, served publicly. Sophie would ask him to meet for closure. I'd be there, quietly at first. And if Mara showed up, we'd end both stories at once. When I got back to the apartment that night, Mara was in the kitchen. She turned when I walked in, startled that I came home at all. The place smelled of reheated food and desperation. She started with an apology that felt rehearsed. Said she made a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. She tried to frame it like a bad face. I stood there, arms crossed, letting her speak until she ran out of air. Then I asked her one question. "How long?" She hesitated. "A few weeks." "Try again," I said. She swallowed hard. "Since March." That was 3 months before the proposal. Something in me broke quietly. Not with rage, but with finality. She saw it in my eyes because she tried to soften the damage. Told me Ian was just confused, that he said he'd leave Sophie soon, that it was supposed to end before our wedding. That last sentence stopped me cold. He said he'd leave her soon. So it wasn't just a fling. It was a plan. I walked out without a word. She followed me to the door, calling my name, crying, begging me to stay. I didn't turn around. I needed distance. I drove aimlessly for hours. Past the waterfront, past the streets we used to walk, past the restaurant where I'd first met her parents. It all felt contaminated. I stopped eventually at a parking lot near a gas station, turned off the engine, and sat there until sunrise. In the morning, I messaged Sophie. "He'll meet you today? I'll be there too." She replied within seconds. 3 p.m. Starbucks. "He thinks it's to talk things through." When the time came, I was already inside before either of them arrived. I sat near the window with sunglasses on, hood up. The barista saw me and subtly nodded again. She seemed to understand this wasn't just gossip. It was something that needed to end. Ian came in first. He looked nothing like the man from yesterday's smug smile. His posture was tense, eyes darting around. He had that jittery guilt of someone who knows they've run out of lies. A few minutes later, Sophie walked in. She didn't sit down right away, just stood across from him, arms folded. I couldn't hear them clearly, but I could see the shift in his body language as she spoke. His hands went from defensive to desperate. Then she placed something on the table, printed screenshots. I knew what they were. The messages. He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. His face went pale. And then the door opened again. Mara walked in. My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd stop breathing. She scanned the room, spotted Ian, then Sophie, then me. Her entire body stiffened. She must have guessed what was happening because her tone turned sharp immediately. What's going on? She demanded. Sophie turned toward her slowly, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. You should sit down, she said. Mara didn't. She looked at me, maybe hoping I'd save her from this mess. I didn't move. The scene unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Sophie revealed everything. The hotel charges, the overlapping lies, the pregnancy. Yes, Sophie was pregnant. Mara's expression faltered for the first time, and she took a step back as if the ground beneath her had cracked open. Ian tried to speak, but Sophie slammed her hand on the table. People were staring now, phones out. I stayed seated, letting the chaos play out. Every word, every tear, every accusation. All of it was just proof I didn't need to fabricate. But then Mara tried to twist it. She looked around and said loudly that I'd been controlling, that this was all a setup. The tone shifted in an instant. Ian tried to back her up, saying he was just trying to help her through a rough time. That's when Sophie reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and showed them both something that silenced the entire cafe. Video clips from security footage. The barista had shared recordings with her. Dates, times, the two of them meeting, laughing, kissing outside the window. There was no escaping that kind of truth. I stood up, finally, and walked over. Both of them looked at me like they'd seen a ghost. I didn't say a single word. I just placed Mara's engagement ring on the table between them and walked out. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, chairs scraping, someone crying, but none of it mattered anymore. By the time I reached my car, the barista had followed me outside. She handed me something small, a USB drive. I thought you might need this, she said quietly. I looked down. What's on it? Everything, she said. They've been coming here for months. She walked back in before I could thank her. I stood there for a long moment, the city moving around me, my reflection in the cafe window staring back. The man who'd walked in for coffee and walked out with his entire life rewritten. And for the first time, I felt something like relief. Because now, I had the truth. When I got home that night, the apartment looked untouched, but the silence had changed. It wasn't the usual kind. It was the kind that follows something irreversibly broken. I sat on the couch, the USB drive in my hand. I didn't want to open it. Not yet. Knowing the truth and watching it were two different things, and I'd already lived the first. Still, curiosity has a way of pushing through exhaustion. I plugged it into my laptop, and there it was, a folder labeled Starbucks Security. Inside were short clips, each time-stamped. I clicked one. The camera angle showed the same table I'd seen them at. Mara and Ian sat there, holding hands, whispering, laughing. It was worse than I'd imagined. They looked comfortable, casual, as if their betrayal was just another part of their day. In another clip, she leaned in and kissed him. Not a stolen moment. A slow, deliberate one. The kind that belongs to people who believe no one's watching. I didn't get through the rest. I shut the laptop, sat in the dark, and tried to breathe. That's when my phone buzzed. Sophie. He's begging to meet, her message said. Said he'll tell me everything if I just don't ruin his career. I stared at the screen. Ian was trying to minimize the damage. He didn't realize it was too late for both of them. I called her. She picked up instantly. Let's do it tomorrow, I said. But not in private. He's a coward. He needs an audience. Where? She asked. I didn't hesitate. The same place. Starbucks. By the time the next afternoon came, I wasn't angry anymore. Just focused. The plan was simple. Sophie would confront him, and I'd be nearby again. No yelling, no violence. Just the truth, laid bare for anyone who wanted to see. When I arrived, the cafe felt heavier than usual. The air conditioning hummed softly, the espresso machine hissed. I sat in the corner, hood up, the same seat where everything had started. The barista caught my eye again, a knowing look that said she was ready if things got messy. At 3:08, Ian arrived. He looked smaller than before, hunched shoulders, unshaven face, nervous glances. He ordered something, didn't touch it. Sophie entered a minute later. She walked straight to him, placed her bag on the table, and took a seat. I couldn't hear them clearly, but I could read enough from the gestures. She asked questions, he avoided them. She pressed harder, he folded. When she mentioned the pregnancy, he reached for her hand, and she pulled back so fast his expression cracked. He said something desperate, head in his hands. Then she took out her phone. I recognized the security footage playing. Ian's eyes widened. He stammered something, probably trying to justify it. That's when the door opened again, and I felt my pulse spike. Mara walked in. She was dressed like she was headed to brunch. Calm, confident, pretending the world hadn't just fallen apart. I could tell she'd rehearsed a version of this moment where she was the victim. Her eyes scanned the cafe until she saw them, and then she saw me. Her confidence faltered instantly. She froze by the counter. Sophie turned toward her, expression hard. "You might as well sit down," she said. Mara hesitated, then approached, setting her purse on the table like this was some kind of business meeting. Ian looked between them, panicking. "What is this?" Mara said. Sophie leaned forward. "It's the end of your story. That's what it is." Mara's voice dropped. "You don't get to talk to me like that." Sophie ignored her, took out the printouts again, spreading them like cards across the table. Texts, photos, credit card statements. "You met my husband in hotel rooms I paid for," she said. "You lied to him, lied to me, and spent his salary pretending it was love." People around were starting to whisper. The barista stopped wiping the counter. Ian muttered something about privacy, but Sophie wasn't finished. "Did you tell him I'm pregnant?" she asked. That landed like a grenade. Mara blinked, processing. She hadn't known. Ian tried to calm them both, his hands raised like a referee. "Everyone needs to stop. This isn't the place." But that's when I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp enough to silence the whole cafe. Mara turned to me instantly, eyes wide. "Lucas," she said, relief breaking through her panic. "Please, can we talk?" I walked over and set the USB drive on the table beside her phone. "That's all the proof anyone needs," I said. She looked down, confused. Ian leaned closer, squinting at the drive, realization spreading across his face. "Where did you?" "Your favorite table has cameras," I said. "You were never as clever as you thought." Sophie gave me a look of quiet gratitude. Then, to everyone's shock, the barista walked out from behind the counter holding her phone. "Actually," she said, "they've been bothering staff for weeks. Management told me to keep an eye on them. I've got footage too." That froze both of them completely. The barista's calmness cut deeper than anger ever could. Ian's composure crumbled first. He looked at Sophie, pleading, saying he was confused, that he never meant for it to go this far. Mara stood there like she'd been caught in headlights. Her words tangled before they reached her mouth. Then, desperate, she turned on me. "You don't understand," she said. "You're not easy to love. You're cold. You make people feel like they're walking on eggshells." That was her defense, shifting blame like it was a language she'd mastered. Sophie didn't let her finish. "He's cold because people like you drain the warmth out of him," she said flatly. Mara's face twisted, but before she could respond, a cup crashed to the floor. Ian had slammed his hand down, shouting at everyone to stop recording. Two people near the counter had their phones up already. The barista stepped in, telling him to calm down or leave. He pushed his chair back hard enough to nearly tip it. "You're ruining my life," he hissed at Sophie. Sophie stared back, unflinching. "You already did that yourself." I didn't stay to see the rest. I walked out as their voices carried behind me. The air outside felt heavier, but cleaner. The sound of traffic felt more alive than the suffocating silence that had followed me for days. I stood on the sidewalk, watching through the window as police arrived minutes later. Someone must have called them. Mara was crying now. Ian was arguing with the officers, gesturing wildly. Sophie just sat there, calm, like she'd finally released something poisonous she'd been holding for too long. The barista came outside again, phone still in hand. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You didn't have to do that." She shrugged. "I've seen people like them before. They always think no one's watching." She handed me a folded receipt, her manager's contact info, in case I needed an official statement. I thanked her and walked to my car. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady. Not happy, just steady. Driving away, I thought about how many small signs I'd ignored. The late texts, the phone turned upside down, the sudden coldness followed by over-the-top affection. It all made sense now. Betrayal doesn't happen in a single moment. It grows quietly, like mold, until one day you finally see it under the light. I parked outside my apartment, but didn't go in. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the ring box still on the dashboard. It looked foreign now, like it belonged to a different life. I opened it once more, just to see the empty space where the ring had been. Then I shut it for good. Tomorrow, I'd call her office. There were still a few truths left to deliver. The next morning began with quiet that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt intentional, like peace after a storm. I'd spent the night on the couch, too wired to sleep. When the sun hit the blinds, I already knew what needed to happen next. Mara's face in that cafe wouldn't leave my mind. Not the crying, the calculation. The moment she realized she couldn't talk her way out of it, she'd switched to survival mode. I'd seen it before in her, small lies wrapped in softness, meant to keep control. This time, though, she burned through her last excuse. I opened my laptop and started going through our joint files, invoices, credit statements, travel reimbursements. She'd used my company card for her marketing retreats, and one receipt caught my eye. Lakeview Hotel, corporate event catering, $1,742. Except Mara wasn't part of any corporate team. The name attached to the booking was Ian Wallace. It was his company. She'd booked under his employer, billed it through mine, and I was the one who paid. That was enough. I drove to her workplace, a small PR firm downtown. I'd been there dozens of times, brought her lunch, waited in the car when she was running late. The receptionist recognized me. "She's not in," she said. "She's been working remote this week." I smiled polite. "Then maybe you can help me with something else. I need to speak with HR. The HR manager was a man named Trent, mid-40s, firm handshake, neutral smile. I told him who I was and explained the situation calmly, showing the receipts. He didn't react at first, but when I mentioned the possibility of company funds being misused for personal travel, his posture changed immediately. He thanked me, said they'd look into it, and asked if I could send documentation. I did, screenshots, payment records, timestamped charges. Within an hour, I got an email from him confirming they were launching an internal review. That same afternoon, Sophie texted me. "It's done. HR at his company got the footage too. They're meeting with him now." I didn't ask how she'd managed it. I didn't need to. We both wanted the same thing, truth with consequences. By evening, everything had started unraveling faster than either of us expected. Ian's company suspended him pending investigation for misuse of expense accounts. Mara's firm placed her on leave while they reviewed her professional conduct. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was accountability catching up. A week later, I was at home when someone knocked. I didn't have to check who it was. I already knew. Mara stood there on the porch, makeup gone, hair tangled, holding an envelope. She looked nothing like the woman who used to talk about summer weddings and new apartments. She looked tired, desperate. "I just need you to listen," she said quietly. I didn't move. She took that as permission to continue. "I lost my job. They're investigating. I don't know what to do." I waited. She kept going. "I made a mistake, Lucas. I know that. But I loved you. I still do." He didn't mean anything. I felt invisible. "You worked so much. You were never really there." It was the same story, just rearranged, the same self-preserving narrative. She handed me the envelope. Inside was the engagement ring. It looked smaller now, dull. "I thought maybe," she started, but her voice cracked. "Maybe we could talk. Fix things. Please." I looked at the ring for a long moment, then back at her. "You didn't just cheat," I said. "You lied about who you were. You used what we had like currency." She started crying harder. "Please, I don't have anyone else." For a moment, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered Sophie's face that day in the car, the exhaustion, the quiet heartbreak of a woman betrayed while carrying a child. Mara wasn't a victim. She was the cause. "I think you should leave," I said. She hesitated, searching for some weakness in my tone. When she didn't find one, she turned slowly and walked away. I watched her go until she reached the end of the street. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a strange kind of stillness. Mara didn't call again. Ian's name started circulating online after someone leaked details of his suspension, internal investigation, ethical breach. Sophie later told me he'd tried to negotiate with her through a lawyer, offering to rebuild trust. She filed for divorce the next day. Sometimes we'd text, just short updates, not about feelings, just about progress. I learned she'd had a baby girl, healthy and calm. She sent me a picture once, the baby's hand gripping her finger. It made me smile in a way I hadn't in months. Then, one afternoon, I got a small package in the mail. No return label. Inside was a Starbucks gift card and a note in neat handwriting. "Freedom tastes different now. S." It caught me off guard how much that line hit. Not sentimental, just true. I went back to that same Starbucks a few days later. The barista recognized me instantly, smiled faintly, and said, "Haven't seen you in a while." I thanked her for everything, for the napkin, for the courage to speak when most people would have stayed quiet. She shrugged it off. "Sometimes people need witnesses," she said. "Otherwise the liars keep the story." I sat down at the same table. It wasn't emotional or symbolic. It was just a place that used to belong to pain, now reclaimed by quiet. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar. Across the room, a couple was laughing, not Mara and Ian, just strangers. Their laughter sounded different. It didn't sting anymore. It sounded human again. I thought about how betrayal never happens suddenly. It grows through tiny decisions, the ignored calls, the secret texts, the rationalizations whispered to yourself. It's built out of convenience. That's what made it dangerous. When I left the cafe, the sun was low. My reflection in the glass door caught me. Not the broken version that first walked out of this place, but someone who'd finally let go. That night, I put the engagement ring back in its box, sealed it, and drove to the pier. I threw it into the water. No speeches, no ceremony, just a quiet end to something that had already died long before I saw it happen. Driving home, I realized that the story hadn't been about her or him at all. It had been about learning the difference between peace and silence. Silence is fragile. Peace is earned. And I'd finally earned mine.